I'm Timothy Vigil, and this is Just Another Word podcast, the Word of the Day podcast for storytellers. H is for heretic. The heretic is not he who burns the stake, but he for whom the stake is burnt. Bertolt Brecht. To find a heretic, you have to find a wall. A heretic never exists in a vacuum. They exist in opposition to an established truth, a dogma, or a sacred boundary. We might associate the word with the smoke of the Inquisition, but a heretic is just a person who looks at something unquestionable and asks, why? Heretic comes from Greek, the word hairetikos. Sorry, I probably butchered this pronunciation there, meaning able to choose. In the original context of the word, in the word's original context, a heretic wasn't necessarily a villain. They were someone who made a choice that diverged from the collective. But over time, that choice became synonymous with betrayal, subversion, and danger. I think there are some interesting words that we can connect here with heretic to tell the story of why this word became so divisive, and why it might be a little less so today. Let's look at the definition of the three words here: heretic, orthodoxy, and zealot. A heretic is one who holds an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted. Generally accepted, or orthodox. Orthodoxy, right? Definition here: the correct or accepted belief system that the heretic challenges. And lastly, a zealot. A person who is fanatical and uncompromising in the pursuit of their ideals. Usually these ideals are the orthodoxy. See, the word heretic became so subversive, became someone who was betraying, became someone who was dangerous, because orthodoxy became so concrete. The belief system of a specific part of the world became so connected primarily to Christianity that the heretic became a good word to use for someone who was a destructive force at odds with what was generally held as accepted. It was a easy shorthand for the other. As a storyteller, we can use heretic in a really interesting way to challenge the assumptions and beliefs of those in a story. But I think for a storyteller, the gold isn't just in the heretic. This is going to be an interesting episode because I want to talk about two words and really their connection. And those two are two that we've already defined: heretic and zealot. It's in this relationship between the heretic and the zealot that we get a really interesting and rich place for story. These are two extremes of the human spirit, and when they collide, the sparks create the best kind of narrative. And in this moment, you might be thinking, do we really need extreme viewpoints going at each other? Don't we get enough of that in real life? And the answer I would say is yes, we absolutely do need to see these extreme views in fiction, because when we see this in fiction, it gives us the opportunity to address, are we on one of these sides? It gives the reader and the writer an opportunity to think about where they stand on similar but very different issues, likely. But the heretic and the zealot are often much more alike than they are different. And I think this also gives us some really great things to work with. Both a heretic and a zealot are defined by an obsession with the truth. The zealot protects the truth by building a fortress around it. There is no break. There is no other opinion or thought that works. But the heretic protects the truth by trying to tear the fortress down, seeing the walls as a cage, seeing the walls as an unrealistic depiction of something. They are looking at a defined truth and saying, does that make sense? There are so many examples of people who, in the first moment, would have been considered a heretic, but now we look at them quite differently. The narrative fun of the heretic and the zealot is when you put these two in a room, or it doesn't need to be a room, but you put them together. You don't need a monster or a ticking clock to create tension. Their dialogue can be a battlefield. The zealot provides stakes. They represent the law or the tradition or the weight of how things have always been. And a zealot doesn't need to be religious in your story. A zealot could be someone who is defined by their view of the law. They are someone who is defined by a specific tradition, someone who is unwilling to waver. And the heretic provides a catalyst. They represent change. They represent the unknown. They represent the terrifying possibility that the world is actually bigger than the zealot is willing to admit. The heretic uses their expression of trying to understand more truth, and the zealot resists that. Some of the most compelling villains in stories are often zealots. I'm reminded of Brandon Sanderson's first novel, Elantris. The primary antagonist is a zealot who is working through his zealotry, and really the true antagonist beneath that is someone who's even more of a zealot. And even these two zealots rubbing against each other creates friction. But then one of our primary protagonists is really, she is part of another religion, but in the eyes of the antagonist is a heretic. And the zealot often believes they are doing good. This is true in Elantris. Well, some of the most relatable heroes are heretics, willing to be hated in order to do what is right. These are the people who are willing to step against the truth. We have so many examples of this. Just look at Martin Luther King and other heroes of the civil rights movement. In their time, this was an accepted belief by so many that they were other. And they stepped against this, willing to be hated, willing to be mocked, willing to be attacked to create a more fair society. And we can take these lessons and put them into our story. You don't have to have religion to be a heretic. Think of a scientific heretic, one who suggests the world is round when everyone knows it's flat. Or a social heretic who refuses to follow a tradition that has become cruel. Think of maybe someone in a college who refuses to haze the new members of their fraternity. Or the internal heretic, a character who begins to doubt their own lifelong mission, becoming a traitor to their former self. These are all ways that we can use heresy. We can use this seeking of a new truth to really create something very interesting within a character. The heretic is a reminder that truth is often just a matter of consensus. As a writer, use the heretic to force your audience to question their own assumptions. The heretic doesn't have to believe what you believe either. I think this is really important. The heretic is someone who we should be giving them their own sense of belief and letting them explore this. Your protagonist, if they become a heretic, they lose the safety of the crowd, but they gain the one thing the crowd can never have: freedom of their own eyes. They get to make their choices from what they see. And you get to do this. You get to express feelings and beliefs that aren't necessarily your own, but come at truth from a different angle. And this creates incredible narrative momentum. The drama of the heretic isn't in the fire. It's in that moment when they decide that their choice is worth more than their safety. By pitting the radical why of the heretic against the unyielding because of the zealot, you create a story that doesn't just move, it ignites. So in your next draft, don't just give us a rebel. Think if you could give us a heretic, someone who is rubbing against a specific belief, and show us exactly what wall they are trying to pull down.
You have been listening to Just Another Word podcast with your host, Timothy Vigil. For more information, go to timothyvigil.com.